Awesome. All right. Well, as we wait for others to join, fingers crossed, bless you. Um, we've got
This is how I wanted to kick off this call tonight.
we thought we'd introduce ourselves and just, if you're, obviously if you're driving, be safe, but just your name, your the grade your kids are in, and we thought, heading into the summer, what's one thing you're looking forward to? I can start. My name is Ryan, and in addition to being the co-founder and executive director, I also am a parent to a fifth grader, and I am looking forward to. We're planning a road trip, and my kids are great road trippers, and I'm really looking forward to being kind of in the car with them for what'll be a long time. So yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Hi, all. I'm Emily, other co-founder, executive director, being in a car for long periods of time with my three children. It's the last way I'd like to spend my summer. We're very different. I am looking forward to, it's our first time my older girls are going away to a sleepover camp. So I'm looking forward to a little quiet in the household and experiences that they're going to have. It's going to be great. Some folks might not be in a position if you're driving or doing other things, but if you are in a position to unmute yourself and say hello, we'd love to hear from you. Or you can put it in the chat if that's easier. Or you can just listen.
Hi, Chad Stevenson here. I'm a parent to two sixth graders, and I am looking forward to also having some time away from my kids a little bit. They're going to be traveling with their mom this summer, so I'm looking forward to having a little quiet time in the house.
Nice.
Looks like a very comfy seat, Chad. You look like you're all here.
I'm ready. I'm ready for this.
That's awesome.
This is Heather. Managed to change my name. I have a sixth grader, Henry, and for summer, we're planning to be gone the entire summer, hopefully, part out of the country and part up in Truckee. So I'm looking forward to that, but my father is really unwell, and so all of our plans are up in the air, and it's unclear if any of them will happen. So it'd be nice to have some certainty, but I'm looking forward to hopefully being away.
Fingers crossed. All right.
Let's jump in. We've got lots of information on where our budget is, what's informing the budget. We're also a nice small group. So it's, we've prepared some slides and information, but this is certainly meant to be a dialogue. So jump in at any point with questions, comments. Hey, this isn't clear.
Yes, please. All right, let me just share. All right. So welcome. This is kind of the part in our planning for next year where we are presenting a kind of a draft budget, right? So we've been working hard on kind of looking at this current year. And actually, wait, I don't know why I'm trying to explain this before getting into it. Sorry. We're going to give that one quick second. Today, we're going to do introductions. We've already done them. If others join, we'll make sure we're incorporating them. There's a little hi from Jared in the chat. We'll do kind of an overview of our budgeting, right? So how we structure the budgeting process and also kind of like how our budget is constructed. Then we'll go into our planning for the 2025-26 school year for next year. And that is this is the way our budget is shaping up by numbers, but also in terms of what were the themes and kind of the important pieces, the important actions that we're taking from this year and our analysis of this year heading into next year. And then we'll get into some questions and answers. Okay, so just very quickly, this is where we are in our planning process. We've had a couple meetings and coffee chats. We have presented data across the school, that's student data, staff data, family data, as for families, and also with our team and others. We've made sense of that data, trying to look for kind of what's important, trends coming out of it. And right now we're in that kind of the May 29th meeting where we're presenting our draft budget, getting some feedback from families on that, and then heading into when we will present our finalized budget to families for feedback on the 17th. And that directly precedes the approval of our board later in June.
And then from there, it is submitted to the state by June 30th.
Yep.
This is just a recap. You've seen this probably before, but these are our organizational priorities that are sticking for 2 years. So they were introduced at the start of this year. We will carry them forward into next year because they are big. And as you can appreciate, there's many different strategies and ways in which we approach this. So keep the priorities very broad, but the strategies will shift from year to year. But our first big organizational priority for this year, next year, is around our commitment to being an anti-racist school, anti-racist educators. And so again, we'll get more into kind of what are some of the explicit strategies for next year. Our second big priority has been building transformative relationships. We think about that as relationships student to student, student to educator, and families to school as well. And our third is operational excellence. So kind of moving out of startup mode in our 10th year and really trying to codify and become more efficient with many of our systems and structures so that more of our time and energy can be spent on our work with students.
Okay, so at the end of this process, we want the budgeting process. We want to make sure that our budget reflects our organizational priorities, right, and that Emily just went through, and our operational realities. Kind of, how did this year kind of inform what we should be doing next year to better meet our priorities? We also want a process that allows input from our community in general, from staff and families, and that we want to make sure that they understand that there is a direct impact from this input into our planning and budgeting. And then we want to make sure that that actually pulls from our community's time, expertise, and insight.
So we're going to look at this year's budget first, just a little bit of a look of like where this year's budget is, because that is informative and helps kind of lay the foundation for next year's budget. So these slides are in reference to, again, this year's, the 24-25 budget, just as a refresher of how we got where we are. So there are a couple things that were impacting us last year as we headed into this year. One was we saw one of the lowest increases in COLA, cost of living, probably, I think, over our entire 10 years. Maybe there's 1 year that was lower, but very small increase in state funding. In addition, a loss of important and large one-time COVID relief funding. Given that and given added expenditure over the course of the pandemic, we depleted our reserve. So we were facing that heading into this year, needing to correct for that. And a decrease in fundraising, given 3 of our key funders funded the expansion of the middle school. But once we kind of quote unquote reached steady state 2 years ago, that funding stopped. And then attendance assumptions. We had loftier aspirations for our attendance that we did not hit. That writing was on the wall early into the fall, in addition to our enrollment, and we had to adjust for that. And yet, even given all that, we knew one of the most important things we needed to do, given changes with SFUSD's pay scale, was remain competitive in our compensation for teachers. So that was one of the first dominoes that fell in forming this year's budget in terms of prioritizing significant increases in teacher compensation heading into this year. And when I say significant, those increases varied based on years of teaching experience on our pay scale, but some teachers received up to a 16% pay increase from last year to this year. I'll just pause there if there's any questions on last year heading into this year, forming this year's budget. Okay, we'll keep going then.
Good. If there are any questions that come up, don't hesitate to ask. Oh, we have someone raising their hand. Chad.
Hi, I am curious to know a little bit about the arts funding. I know this is kind of getting in the weeds a little bit, but I know there was a state, offering there on the table. Did we make use of that? I'm a little behind in that conversation, I think.
We did. We get about $60,000 in arts funding, and that doesn't fully cover our two art teacher headcounts that we had this year, Mr. Omar and Mr. Omar and Miss Liz, but it was certainly helpful.
Yeah.
So yes, we
And
get
will-
that funding, and we'll
will
get
that-
it next year as well.
Oh, great, great. So the art teacher will come back, or there will be an art teacher for the lower school that will replace. Okay. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah.
Great question.
And we'll talk about middle school and what that means for next year in a second, Chad.
So we want to go just a little bit about how our budget is constructed. I think we've presented this out a couple of times, certainly over the years, but I want to just make sure that everyone feels comfortable with kind of how our budget is constructed and kind of where we've come over the last couple of years. So where does our money come from? It's a mix of state funding, philanthropy, and fees for services. Fundraising accounts for about a quarter of all of our funding. Obviously, the vast majority of it comes from state and federal funding. So therefore, when we have a cost of living adjustment that is quite small, then it makes a disproportionate impact to our overall funding. And then local revenues. And local revenues are, let's say, fees that we get for the bus services, our after-school program, those types of things.
Overall, our cost per student is just over 19,000 per student here. And you can see just how that breaks down in terms of those three funding sources that Ryan referred to. We are fundraising about just over $4,000 per student annually to make up that delta in what we get in both the local and state funding and what it actually costs to educate a student here at New School. And we try to be transparent with that, really, especially with Magic Fund and why we fundraise and why we ask parents to get involved, that we don't want to reduce that cost per student. We believe, if anything, we want more resources to be able to do more things for students. And so we are not anticipating that 19,000, at least in this building and with this number of students, going down. And so our model will always necessitate fundraising. Yeah, Chad?
Sorry, another question.
Don't be sorry. That's what tonight is for. You're modeling questions. Thank you.
Modeling questioning. Will there be a slide in here, or will you talk about the percentage that goes to staffing out of that 19,196 number?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And what do we spend our money on, Chad? There you go. So
I planned it that way.
So that you can see that, again, the vast majority of funding goes towards people, compensation, benefits, and then also the partnerships we have. And our partnerships, when we say that, are those that bringing people into the building. So that is the vast majority. Then second to that are kind of the other expenses around operating costs. That's our back office support, legal support, tech, transportation, and then finally books and materials. And we can, you'll be able to see this year's budget and kind of how, what those line items look like in the aggregate and in dollar terms. So here's the story of our budget. We're going to go over this quickly, but it gives you some perspective in terms of where we are right now against where we've come from. So over the past 10 years, we've grown a lot. The story is, it is rapid growth, and for many years, we grew a grade every year. We reached steady state 3 years ago. Is that right? This is our third year of steady state. And so over that 10-year period, we've gone from 2.1 million to 8.9 million, and our staff has increased significantly from 25 to 69.
This next slide here shows our student population. So ADA is our average daily attendance. So that's how many students we have in the building and the percentage of days they show up at school. And so you'll see that term from time to time. And ADA is what the state uses to calculate your funding. So They're looking not only at how many students are enrolled in your school, but how often they come to school. We only get money if students come into the building. So that ADA number is incredibly important. And again, factors in two things, your enrollment and your attendance. And so what you can see here is our ADA has increased year upon year, even when we kind of, as Ryan said, get to quote unquote steady state, which was the 2022-23 school year when we first had 8th grade. It's hard to see on this slide because the numbers are, but if you were to zoom in, we have increased about 5 to 10 students per year, even since 22-23 at quote unquote steady states. There have been a couple of grades each year that are either under enrolled or we found a little bit more capacity to add students. But generally speaking, we've kind of remained flat, but still added, again, about 5 to 10 students per year over the last 3 years.
This slide shows where our revenue and expenditure were year on year. And what you want to see here is you want to see your total revenue exceed total expenditure. Our goal as an organization to achieve, long-term sustainability is to have a reserve. Our best practice is to make sure you have 3 months of expenditure as a reserve. And so you'll see as our first year of startup, our expenses far exceeded our revenue. We also fundraised beyond that, and then we brought a lot of fundraising in from basically our startup into that first year. So cash on hand, which is not reflected here. But then from that, we started to receive, more revenue than expense up until 2021. And that was the first year of the pandemic, in which our expenses increased significantly.
And it coincided with the launch of the middle school. So again, we brought at least the middle school back to startup state in which our revenue exceeded what we are getting in per student funding for the middle school.
And so during that period where we are launching the middle school, we are dealing with the pandemics, the impact of the pandemics, we are spending more than we're bringing in, and very purposeful. We've talked about this before. The needs of students coming back quite significant. Obviously, startup needs are also significant, and so drawing on our reserves to fill that gap until this year, actually, this year in which we are reestablishing our reserve with a positive kind of net income.
Here's the story of our fundraising over the last 10 years. And what you can see is on average, annually, we fundraise about $1.7 million. And that, again, covers that gap between what we get per pupil funding from the state and what it actually costs to educate a child here. You see this other thing happening here, which is this very loppy, every 3 years, our fundraising goes up very high. What we've worked hard to do with some of our funders is make multi-year commitments, and the funders that have made multi-year commitments, we try to get at least a 2, if not a 3-year multi-year commitment. Our largest funder makes 3-year multi-year commitments, and those are the spikes in 2016, 2019. Every 3 years, they make about $1 million or a $1.5 million 3-year grant to the school that we rely on. So that kind of explains the jump up. Yeah. Cheers to that, Chad. I agree. And so we can book it in that year as fundraising. It's not actually cash. They deliver, release the installments of the gift every year. So this is the story, similar slide to what we looked at before. That was the story of year 1 to year 10. This is looking at from 2 years ago to this past year. You saw our budget actually decrease. Again, we were making up for the fact that we had used up our reserve and we were trying to get to a positive cash flow for the school. And so we had to make some structural changes to make sure, again, we had a balanced budget and a positive net income at the end of the year. So we worked really hard. We can go back into depth on or explain what I think we will on the next slide, what we did to achieve that. But the budget actually went down and we did not change FTEs. And as we said earlier, we increased teacher compensation significantly. So you can imagine there was other work we had to do to make sure we were increasing teacher compensation, but actually bringing down the budget. That was the gap we had to address.
Big gap.
It was ultimately more precise, but it was, yes, about $800,000, I believe.
Also, the range we and you may have may have kind of have noticed this at the beginning of the year. We in our budgeting for this year, we brought down the budget and then came into this year and had to reevaluate our assumptions around specifically around our attendance and enrollment, and so had to further decrease this year's budget at the start of this year. Yeah, Chad, that's a great. Yeah, full-time employees. FTE is full-time employees. And so now on to this year and how we're thinking about this year.
Quick question about the enroll or the attendance. Is that typical for San Francisco? Like, are we just saying what San Francisco normally has in terms of attendance, or is our school also like suffering from something in particular?
I don't think it's a great question, Kat. It's not specific to New School. I think attendance has really fallen. I think chronic truancy has increased pretty significantly post-pandemic. That is something that's affecting schools across the country. So this is not just a New School thing. And what I would say is that what differentiates schools are their approach to attendance. And so I think we're at 94%. I think that for many schools that's enviable. For some schools we're below where I wish to say many schools that's enviable. We're below other schools. I want to be where those other schools are at, and I think we can. I mean, we came into the pandemic with 96.7% attendance, and I think while things are different, right, and they are not sufficiently different where we can't get back there. It's going to take different strategies, though, right? Because the context is a bit different, and so we have some ideas of how we do that. But no, I think that we are as our kids and families are as impacted by kind of the changes, right, that have increased, let's say, truancy as any other school. Yeah, Chad.
To follow up on that, for Kat's question, can you speak to this number you have on the screen, that the 8.9 to 9.2? Is that going to be made up through the change in attendance and average daily attendance?
Well, we'll get on to that. It will be in part, but not in whole, right? So there's some, that we are, and we're going to get to this in just a second. And ideas on attendance. So we are going to increase our attendance assumptions, but it's going to be pretty modest, pretty conservative, only because we don't want to make the mistake we did last year, or I'm sorry, this year. However, I think that we doubled down on some of our strategies this year for attendance, which have borne some good results. I think different would be, I think that we can do better around supporting families who have planned absences to make sure, let's say, we can leverage things like independent study. We're going to use that judiciously because obviously we want kids in school, but we can use it more, right? Based on changes in state law that it will allow us to. That will help. We certainly know other schools are using that to that effect. Also, that could free us up to focus on areas around chronic truancy and really coming alongside of those families who are experiencing chronic truancy to be able to provide supports to get their kids in. So I think for us, it is really targeted, right? So support for families, really understanding the individual context of families, being able to provide things like independent study where possible, and then also making sure that we are just providing more resource towards our attendance, and meaning opening up conversations with families. What do you need in order for students to be here? Part of that is honestly a whole school approach to attendance, where it's not just an administrative and or operations kind of function. It is a everybody in the building function, right? There's nothing more powerful for attendance than a trusted adult who says, I want you to be here. And that, sometimes that is the front desk person, but sometimes, it's your teacher. Sometimes it's the adult, it's your after school, it's your after school provider. But that is, research has shown that's one of the most powerful motivators for attendance in schools. So we have some great ideas. We're going to be putting them into place. We're refocusing on it because at the end of the day, this is not just a financial issue. This is around just like kids in schools just do better in general. So that's where we want them to be.
Let's say the other things just driving the increased expenditure, Chad, too, is, and we'll get onto this, but we're adding again, we anticipate about 5 to 10 additional students this year. Those are largely made up by TK, and you get more funding for TK students than for other students as well. So there's some additional funding there.
And there it goes.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Pull back the curtains. So state funding is increasing by 2.4%. Again, that's up from 1% from last year into this year. So that's a nice little bump. We'd still love that to be much higher. One year, I think our highest was, do we have one year it was 12% increase in state funding?
Yeah, or 13 or something.
13,
It was
right,
a
yeah.
big bump.
So modest increase here, but still better than 1% last year. Working to find more efficiencies in some of our people and programs that we have. We are only doing modest compensation increases this year, given the large investment we made last year, and we were transparent with staff. Like, we rejiggered and re-upped the pay scale, but we were clear this pay scale is sticking for at least 2 years. I just mentioned this one, the modest increase to student enrollment, inclusive of the fact that some of the students will bring in more than the $13,000 because they're TK students. And then, as Ryan spoke to, the modest increase in attendance from 94% to 95% next year.
The other thing in student enrollment, which we can get back onto, is we're also opening up a second, what would be a second grade classroom. And so we're backfilling. We had an under enrollment in that grade, right? Which was a bit of an anomaly, but we're backfilling that and we're building that up to 2 full classrooms. That won't happen only next year, but that, it's a big positive step.
Yeah.
In terms of
that cohort's going from 31 students to, we hope, closer to 38 students, hopefully 40 if we can get there.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so in dollar terms, this is kind of how our budget looks both this year and next year. And so when you look at them side by side, you'll see that increase in what's LCFF entitlement. That's local controlled funding formula entitlement. That's really the state funding coming in, and so you'll see that modest increase there. You'll see kind of a strange federal revenue. It goes from 1.1 million down to 339. That is an expected reduction. That has to do with the fact that this year we received federal funding that was connected to ERC, or Employee Retention Credit. That is something that we applied for a long time ago. That finally came in. I mean, it's been about an 18-month wait. So that was great. You can see again other state revenues, some of those local revenues, which include but not entirely made up of fees for services and fundraising and grants. And that increase that you see there, about $500,000 in fundraising and grants, Emily spoke to in terms of just kind of that peak, kind of 3-year cycle peak that we get with multi-year fundraising. On the on the expense side, you'll see that compensation and benefits, that increases, right? Based off of not only just the increases that we're making to staff compensation, but also to the increase in headcount. You'll see a modest but important increase in books and supplies. And then you'll see
Pretty much remaining flat for.
Which some of the expenses here, what we're seeing is you're basically seeing almost no, like Emily said, almost no increase. That has to do with kind of finding efficiencies, renegotiating contracts, and being able to take out expenditure and applying it to other places. Is there any question? Oh, and the last thing I'd say is that net income is really important in terms of how we come into this year, and then again, how we build up our reserves as an organization.
And the reserve is important, not just obviously to have access to cash on hand as we need and a rainy day fund, but also as we get closer to reauthorization in 2028, it's incredibly important that we demonstrate a very healthy reserve. The state mandates 5%. Again, pre-pandemic, we were hovering around, I think, a 15 to 20% reserve.
Any questions about the numbers or anything we've discussed this far?
All right, we'll keep going. It's a much rosier picture than this call last year at this time. All right, let's get into some program stuff. What does this mean for kids and teachers? All right, we're going to start by, for folks that were at the coffee chat we had last month, the next two slides are going to look familiar. This was a reflection back of some of the themes in our academic data, our staff climate survey data, our family climate survey data, and just street data. What are we living? What are we hearing? What are we getting from families and their comments, emails, pickup, drop off, comments, etc. So these are just some of the top line ones. These are not, exhaustive of all the things that came out of looking at our data. But in terms of big areas of strength and pride for this year, so for both the family climate survey and our staff climate survey, these are annual surveys. We don't adjust the questions much over the last 10 years. So it's really nice to have the historical data where you can compare each of the questions. These are the highest scores that we've had in the last 3 years. So really kind of coming out of the pandemic, stabilizing aspects of our program, and feel really proud about that. And some real big jumps in certain questions. If you haven't looked at the data, it's posted, it's accessible to all families in English and Spanish. I really encourage folks to check out the staff and family climate survey data. This one's super exciting. This is the highest teacher retention we've had ever as a school in 10 years. So we are forecasting 97% teacher retention. Yay, I know. We are turning over one, I'm going to say classroom teacher, and then I'll clarify, one grade level teacher from K all the way to 8th grade next year. That's already been shared. That's Miss Niffler, our 7th grade social studies teacher who's been with us for 5 years. Her family's moved out of San Francisco a number of years ago, and her son is graduating from 8th grade. But that is the only grade level teacher that is transitioning next year. And then we shared as well, one of our other teachers transitioning is Miss Liz, our lower elementary art teacher.
Interestingly enough, I just want to just a little anecdote here, but we just got out of conversation right before this, right before our call, right? And it was with a teacher heading into their 17th year of teaching, and said the school previous, or the school system that they were previously at before they joined a new school a number of years ago, they just hit a ceiling, right? They love their kids, but hit a ceiling professionally, and chose new school because they could see, the opportunity for them professionally. And she said, I just this is turned out, it's just a dream job. And I think that's where we want to be. We want to be able to attract and retain just the most highest quality people. And we're just extremely proud of that percentage. And also it's just like,
and the quality of our teaching team. It's not just about retaining, but such a high quality team.
Absolutely. And just the institutional knowledge they bring with them, and how much more you can do when you have a high quality team who has deep experience in your school, in the kids. It is night and day from where we were right after the pandemic, right? 2 years after the pandemic, where we, along with pretty much every other school, was really losing teachers from the profession. And what we're finding is a real reversal of that in many different ways. But so really proud.
Family retention is also forecasting to be very, very high, about what it was last year, but this is still a point of pride of retaining so many of our families. Family enrollment, I think that's the same as retention, or just families that are re-enrolling, you're saying?
Well, for next year. So,
Got it.
we have, yes.
Enrollment of new families, right?
Yes.
Pacing ahead of where we were
Yeah.
last year in terms of for kinder,
Yeah.
okay.
So we're also, our applications into the school, and things have really changed in San Francisco. Demographics, I mean, you've probably, read, heard, demographics are really shifting in San Francisco. And so many schools, the district and many other schools, are seeing declining enrollment. We are actually seeing increasing enrollment. However, I would say it's become a lot more competitive, a lot more competitive. And so we are, we're not able to hold our enrollment, but we're able to increase modestly and back it largely, backfilling where we've had in specific grades under enrollment. So we're pleased about that. Our recruitment, we have more applications at this time, basically this year than the last 3 years. So we're seeing an increase in applications. And I think that will only increase through August as the new enrollment system for SFE at USD plays out, and as families kind of cycle through wait lists.
All right, let's keep moving and grooving. We talked about strengthening the budget is in a stronger place. Fundraising is strong. We have an emerging partnership with West Contra Costa Unified, in which we're doing professional development for a school in the district to help them pivot to more inquiry-based teaching and learning, which is a really exciting development and very much in line with our remit to be a demonstration school and bring inquiry-based teaching to more students. And then the last bullet here is that we were designated 2 years ago as a high-performing school in the state of California, which means that for every subgroup of students, in particular underserved subgroups, so Black students, Latinx students, English learners, students with IEPs, we outperform both the city and the state in both reading and math data. We've done that for 2 years, so we've had that designation. So that's certainly a point of pride in and of itself, but it also puts us on track for an automatic renewal for our charter in 2028, which means we avoid the political process with the district, which would be huge. Yeah, Chad.
This is great news about the teacher retention. I'm curious if you've done the teacher survey this year and what the results are that are demonstrating the high retention rates. Like, what are the satisfaction high points this time around?
And that's the one I encourage you to peek into it. That's what we're referring to as the staff climate survey. Some of the questions where we saw the biggest increases this year, I should have this data in front of me. I believe in the mission and purpose, right? So people need to feel like their work is really impactful. I have
strong relationships with colleagues.
Strong relationship. Somebody at work cares about me as a person, an increase in that question. And then an increase, this doesn't get at the root cause, but a question we added on is I can see myself working here in 5 years, and that question went up. So those are some of the things, and a survey is a survey. That doesn't tell the whole story, right? We also get a lot of data in the one-on-one coaching we do with teachers in the goal setting process that they do. What do they want to be true for themselves at the end of the year? What would keep them here? And one of the biggest things we have heard, and I think it's a little bit of a chicken or egg thing that we battled with post-pandemic when we were, had higher attrition of teachers, was this: I am motivated to work alongside other amazing, strong educators. I want to be at a place where the expectations are high and I'm learning from my colleagues, right? And so you can appreciate, again, the chicken or the egg here of like, we're losing some really great educators and trying to, bring on new ones. I think now we've gotten to a place where we have such a high quality and high caliber team that in and of itself helps with retention, because I want to be at a place where I'm teaching alongside other exceptional educators. Yeah, Maria.
I was wondering when you were thinking about letting us know who the second first grade teacher will be. And then also I was curious about Mr. Antoine, if he'll be coming back when he's done with this amazing performance opportunity.
Yes, that is unfortunately not in our country. So 2 parts to your question. We reveal teaching teams. It sort of depends year to year, Maria. We try to do it at the final June meeting to have the teaching team solidified. Obviously, in a year like this coming year where we have very little attrition, I think I can commit that we can share it at the June meeting. Some years, honestly, we haven't shared it till August. We're still hiring over the summer. We are not in that place this year, thank goodness. So that's when we share that information. Every year, just so you know, Maria is a kinder parent and an incoming TK parent, so you're new to this process. we do go through a process with all of our teachers of getting input from them. There's a benefit in keeping grade levels together, right? I know the curriculum, I know the program for fourth grade. I love teaching with my person. We also see real benefit to looping up with kids. And so, for example, Miss Casey looped up with the current third grade cohort from second grade last year. So there's a bit of a process of unearthing and asking teachers, right, what their preference is. And so we go through that every year. So it's not an automatic, we keep grade level teams put, if that makes sense. One other question, Mr. Antoine. We are not 100% sure, Mr. Antoine. So I have a slide we'll get to for what some of the options are and what we're exploring. He stated an intent to want to come back, but he's also launching a new business in which he's going to be training other body percussion teachers and has interest in possibly having some of his residents work under him at the school next year. But right now we can't say with certain it's confirmed. And so we need to be exploring other options as well for our music program.
Awesome. Yeah, he's just wonderful. So fingers crossed, but I'm sure someone else would be amazing too.
I think in some way he will be connected to the school. I can say that with confidence, even if he is not here teaching every day. He loves the school. He's had a huge impact here. So areas of focus, and then I might be more brief because I'm looking at the time and I want to get into some of the concrete changes that we already know about for next year. These are some of our biggest areas of focus, obviously finding a long-term home and facility. I think we had a separate coffee chat about that. We can have another, and Ryan and I can talk at length about that. Long-term financial planning. So again, a positive, more rosy picture with the budget this year, but still need to be making sure we're setting ourselves up to not have be in a position that we were in 2 years ago. In both our staff and our family climate survey data, you see a real outlier in terms of our least satisfied focal group, which are Black students and Black families, or I should say Black families and Black staff members, but also in some of those comments, they're elevating and reflecting the experience of their Black student. That is a real area that we must tend to. And then ongoing work, as always, to narrow the academic gaps that we see along lines of race, learning ability, and language classification. We don't have our spring data fully analyzed, and we haven't shared it yet. But what I can say, the headlines continue to show that we are narrowing those gaps and feeling proud of the progress that we are making, and yet gaps still exist along lines of race and different learning styles in our building. And then more resources for what we're going to call kind of community and culture, student identity, student living out our values, social emotional learning, to make sure that every student here feels safe, feels a sense of belonging. And in a blue sky world, we could mitigate any name calling or pushing or all the things that happen in a school. And inquiry. Sorry, inquiry is a big one. So I'm gonna jump into some of the concrete changes and ask any questions that you have, but to be more precise about some of the things that are changing for next year, we already spoke about TK. We're adding 6 TKers. We have a parent of one of those students on the call. They will be in a combined kinder TK classroom with Miss D next year. Another shift is departmentalizing, I always struggle with that word, 5th grade. So we're doing that for a couple reasons. One, to kind of bridge the transition from elementary to middle school, because we departmentalize in middle school. They're also across the hall from each other, 5th grade and 6th grade. We feel it's developmentally appropriate. It also allows our teachers to go deeper in certain content area and be more specialists than generalists, which our 5th grade team has proposed wanting to do. Another shift is we are creating greater alignment. This one's like hard to fully explain, so I'm gonna try to explain, but jump in if I'm not being clear. For our special education providers or any providers that work with students that might be below grade level and getting additional academic support, many of those providers have spanned many grades, i.e. a Ms. Zulma, who is incredible, works from anywhere from with 1st graders all the way up to 5th graders. One of the explicit shifts we're making, both in response to teacher feedback, but also what we believe is best for students, to narrow those grade spans. So similar to what we're doing with 5th grade, our specialists can go deeper and come alongside and really partner and co-teach with grade level teams. So for all of our providers that are either learning specialists or providing academic or behavioral support, we are working to ensure that they are working with at most 3 grades, but in many cases, they'll be assigned to 1 grade specifically. And that also, that shift reduces the adult to student ratio for that grade because there's more specialized services happening for that grade and another adult in the classroom versus an adult that's often pulling out students. Another shift is Mr. Omar, who is our art teacher that's been with us since our very first year and started in lower elementary, because obviously we were only younger kids when we opened our doors, has kind of moved up with students and has been with the middle school for the last few years. He's moving back down to elementary, so he will be the K through 4th grade art teacher next year, which is also really exciting. He has great expertise around the integration between arts and inquiry as well. So what does that mean for middle school? It opens up the opportunity to consider what is the additional program or subject that's offered for middle school. We have gotten feedback over the years around Spanish in middle school, so we will be pursuing that, which means we will not have art as a class in middle school. Art will be an elective. So it's the reverse. Right now, Spanish is an elective that you can take once a week in middle school. We'll reverse that. Spanish will be something that you are taking consistently, and art will be the elective now for middle school. We will have 2 first grade.
Can you clarify that a little bit? So all middle schoolers will get Spanish 1 day a week. Is that the idea?
No, 2 to 3 times a week, Kat.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah. We think it is. We know that's what middle school families have been advocating and asking for a long time. So we're excited. It means that we're building out a full Spanish curriculum from K through 8th grade. Yeah. We will have 2 first grade classrooms. This one might be obvious, but for folks that don't know, we only have 1 first grade classroom right now. We have a lead teacher and a resident teacher with 31 students. My daughter is in that cohort. Obviously, we have more kids in kinder right now. They will both move up. We'll have 2 first grade classrooms, 2 lead teachers, and 2 resident teachers for first grade. Another shift for middle school is strengthening and better aligning our advising program. So we're putting a lot of time and work right now with the middle school team into what we kind of refer to as vertical alignment in the education world, which essentially means like really ensuring we have a thoughtful curriculum for advising. So thinking that as a real course and a really important time of the day. That builds from 6th through 8th grade and in looking at competencies, not just like our values, but social emotional learning, identity, and racial literacy. We are going to do more with inquiry. Yay! We know this is needed. We've relied on some really seasoned in-house teachers that have been with us and know inquiry really well, but that has not been enough. So we will be getting some explicit and more inquiry professional development for our staff. Similarly, same with our work around being anti-racist educators. We need more explicit support and professional development that is not in-house. I'm going to keep going, but jump in with any questions or reactions to that. Possible changes for next year. We go through a proposal process with our staff where they bring proposals of what they want to see change. One of the proposals that was brought forth by some teachers was a school-wide buddy program. So we're still kind of figuring out the details of it. That's only why it's in yellow and not green. But we've had this pilot, or I'll call it a pilot program going for 2 years where 3rd and 8th grade pair up, and every 3rd grader has an 8th grade buddy. They do at least 1, if not 2 kind of projects with their buddies over the course of the year. They share an exposition together at the end of the year. It's this beautiful partnership that has emerged between these 2 grades. And we want to expand that across the school such that every grade level is buddied and every student at New School has a buddy. But obviously things to still think about, like, do you keep with your buddy for your 9 years at New School? Do you get a new buddy every year? So we're figuring out some of the details of that. And then Maria, you Beat me to this one, question mark around body percussion in our music program, given the question mark around Antoine's capacity next year, and this kind of organization he is building to train educators as well. So it might not be body percussion, but we will still use that block of the day and the time we have for some form of music education. This bucket is our generally room to grow. So even if it's not an explicit thing that was listed on one of these slides, these are all areas of attention and work. We've already spoken to increasing attendance and reducing truancy. So different kind of tactics and strategies, this whole school effort around boosting attendance. Greater proactive family engagement across the school. We know we can do better with this. And I wouldn't say in particular with middle school, but in both grades as well, but consistent feedback of we want more ways to be able to come together as a community, whether that's informally, just as parents to get to know one another, or more structured, i.e. middle school parents want more on digital citizenship, social media, how to support my middle schooler, and so more proactive parent engagements. For middle school, that aligns to bringing in a new director of community and culture, who this is really just her jam and her background, and she is so pumped to do more in the family engagement and culture realm for middle school. Continuing, I mentioned this one, develop a safe, supportive, joyful school culture for all kids. So things like the buddy system, build to that. Things like we're going to have every advising in middle school will actually have to have a name for your advising and an identity, and advisings are going to compete against each other for different sporting events. So things like that to just, again, continue to build kind of school pride, sense of belonging. And then also, as mentioned before, supporting our focal students. This is ongoing work to make sure, again, we're narrowing those academic gaps. And then finally, deeper authentic engagement and partnership to really support our Black students and our Black families.
Ooh.
That was a lot. I will pause. Oh, there's one more. What is not changing?
Brian's
Brian's going to take this one.
So and thank you for that. That was excellent. I'm sure there can be some questions. We'll get through this relatively quickly. 940 Filbert will continue to be our home. I continuously get asked the question in terms of our long-term facilities, and yes, we are still on the hunt for our forever home, but 940 Filbert will be our home for next year. We know that for certain. We will continue to run transportation, our 2 buses. We, of course, are looking to kind of reduce that expense, renegotiate our contracts, but we will still run those 2 buses. They will still have the same routes. We know that's really important for both current and also prospective families. School schedule, including before and after school, that is not going to change. Those same start and end times. As Emily mentioned before, what's not changing next year is our the team. Who you saw this year is pretty much all you're going to see next year, which is amazing. And algebra in 8th grade. So if you see that I'm sorry, algebra in 8th grade, that we will still offer the course, and that we will work to expand access to all.
So this year you had to be eligible for algebra in 8th grade, you had to demonstrate that you're on grade level as measured by your state test scores in 7th grade. We are changing that requirement heading into next year to ensure more accessibility. You don't have to have ended 7th grade on grade level to be eligible for algebra in 8th grade.
And then that difference between the staff retention, we talk about 97% of all of our teachers returning. It's 94% of all staff who are going to be returning, which is still very high. And of course, as in every year, we will be announcing staff departures, and it will be a very short list this year, which is great, but we'll be announcing staff departures.
We've announced all the ones we know.
Well, there you go. You already know.
You know all the ones we know.
If you know more, do tell us. But we're really excited about that. I think, is that it? Questions. We are at the end. We're officially at the end. We have the opportunity for maybe a question, because we also have the Spanish version coming right up. Yes, Chad.
I'm gonna turn my camera on for this one, I think. But I just want to say a big congratulations for the staff and retention and the family retentions. I personally had a small challenge that I put to the school in my head and see how long it would take to rise back to those retention numbers from before the pandemic. And I had it between 3 to 5 years, and you got it around 4. So, I mean, and the fact that that's being improved, and I'm curious to know if your retention strategies are going to be I guess not change or adjusted, but like what is your plan for the future, knowing that in the past the struggles with retention have been around housing or other factors that are kind of beyond the control of the school. But are you guys working on that? You know, now that you have everyone's in place, that can continue to be a struggle. But like, do you have things in mind?
Interesting enough, it's a great question. I think clearly making sure that we're prioritizing being competitive compensation, right? I mean that's really key. And I think we have also where we can made sure that we are accommodating whether it has to even tiny changes in scheduling for working parents. That's also been really key to retaining staff members. I think also just tenure, right? In terms of retaining staff who have established lives within the city is really important, as opposed to greater attrition leading to new hires who are moving into the city where it's just difficult, right? So I think that's another key part, which is the more you retain, the more stable your staffing becomes, which is good. One of the things that actually with a staff member today is like, okay, we've got, and again, this has to do with that institutional kind of knowledge that we can just build upon. We have a staff member who hopefully everyone crossed their fingers in terms of they are in the process for support for buying their first home. They're in the city process, right, for below market rates. And she's like, if I get this right, I want to make sure I turn around and be able to give, basically advice and guidance, right? Or like a workshop to other staff members who can do the same thing, because she says it's tough. So those are the kind of things I think would be helpful to bring on, both in terms of we as a school have control over, and also just like outside of us, how can we best support our team to make a life in San Francisco? And sometimes that can be challenging.
All right, I think we have a Spanish parent that is trying to sign on, so we will wrap the English version. You know where to find us if there's other lingering questions or things that you want to go deeper on. We love talking about this stuff. Know how busy it is right now, so really appreciate you giving an hour of your precious evening to just learn, be informed, and hopefully if you learn something new or interesting, spread it to other parents. I think there's really positive wins, and that just helps to share and bring some positivity to the community. So,
and we're recording it. It's going to be up tomorrow. We'll put it in the Family Digest, but we'll put up the recording. And also, just for those on the call, if you haven't already, do look at our data. I mean it's in the family portal, but it's really good stuff. And you'll also see some of the challenges that we've kind of highlighted tonight in there as well. But overall, it's an important kind of picture of the school, and a really positive one.
good night, all. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Kat.
you, Kat. Good night, Lily. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Maria.
Thanks, Maria.
Bye, Jared.